IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
You're listening to All Things Policy. I'm Aditya Pareek. Before we begin, I'd just like to mention that admissions are now open for our graduate certificate in public policy courses. We offer courses in defense and foreign affairs, tech and policy, health and life sciences. To know more, check out the link in the show notes. Recently, the opposition parties in Pakistan submitted the no-confidence motion against the government of Imran Khan. At a time of massive global instability and deteriorating economic situation in Pakistan, the threat to a democratically elected government will create political instability in our neighbourhood. Why has the situation deteriorated to such an extent? What has caused the opposition to gain this newfound unity? And more importantly, what is the role that the military establishment is playing behind the curtains? To discuss this, we have a resident expert on the Indian subcontinent, Dr. Shrey Khanna, who is my colleague and personal friend. Welcome, Shrey.
Thank you, Aditya.
So to begin with, Shrey, what is happening in Pakistan exactly with this no-confidence motion against Imran Khan, and why has the opposition suddenly united against him?
Yeah, so on March 8th, opposition submitted its resolution for a vote of no confidence against Prime Minister Imran Khan. And finally, Asad Kaisar, who is Speaker of National Assembly, he has decided to convene a special session because the Parliament, their National Assembly, was not in session. So a special session to be convened on Friday this week, 25th March. And the Parliament then will deliberate for 3 days to decide how the proceedings will go on and whether Imran will be able to secure his government. Now, what's happening right now is that there's a lot of internal fighting that is going on, which, for example, many of the PTI legislators, they have said that around 13 of them, they've said that they are going to vote in accordance with their conscience. And PTI already, does not have a majority on its own. The magic number of 72, it does not have. It is in partnership with other smaller parties like MQM, Balochistan Awami Party, PMLQ. And on the one hand, PTI, which is party of Imran Khan, it has to, keep its alliance intact with these smaller parties. On the other hand, it also has to, keep its own flock in check. So recently, and this is, creating tensions in the country. So some of these dissenting MNAs, members of the National Assembly, they were staying in Sindh House in Islamabad, and members of PTI mobs raided that Sindh House, which is actually the domain of Sindh government, and that a ruling party people attacking another provincial government property. So that again created a scene. And what is interesting is that right now, the horse trading, which we talk about in India as well. So to contrast with the horse trading that goes in India, nobody, on the surface accepts that horse trading is going on in India. So it's all usually behind the curtain. But what's happening right now is that because Islam came to power previously with the support of military, and a lot of backroom, shifting and horse trading happened. So right now, the opposition parties, they are saying, for example, Mariam Nawaz, daughter of Nawaz Sharif, she said that, you didn't have numbers previously when you won in like Senate elections. So why do you have issues with horse trading now? So, we're not openly denying that we are not doing a horse trading right now. So there is that, and there is then again the case is that show cause notice has been served to the 13 of PTI lawmakers by the party command, which are mostly from Punjab, and on the grounds of alleged defection, they're going to defect and not vote in favor of PTI. And with that, there is a recent Supreme Court ruling which has come on Article 63A of the Constitution, which deals with the defection or disqualification of parliamentarians. And the Supreme Court, one of the judge, he has observed that voting in parliament is like a collective right. It's not an individual vote. So, but this is not final, and Supreme Court has finally formed a five-member larger bench to decide whether those who are, dissenting from the party high command, will they be allowed to vote against the government? Because the new observation which PTI is forwarding is that if they are going against the party high command, they will be disqualified. But the usual ruling is that you get disqualified after you commit that act. So there is that legal problem that is happening there, and lots of horse trading is going on to buy these MNAs from PTI. So it's very murky situation right now.
Interesting, especially the way you point out to the horse trading that goes on in the political system of India and the way it goes on in Pakistan is quite different. And, the kind of media environment that at least I've been exposed to, I mean, Imran Khan being prime minister since 2018 is an anomaly in and of itself. So I think the instability that at least we, the external audiences of Pakistan's political landscape are used to. I mean, the instability is rather the norm, but this long period of stability is something that we were kind of puzzled by.
Yeah, quote unquote stability. But fun fact is, if Imran stays and he continues with his 5 term, he'll become the first prime minister to do that. So we do not have that kind of situation. So he has finished like around 4 years. He'll finish 4 years now. But yeah, but now it's like a clear crisis.
Interesting. So Imran was known as the favorite of the military establishment. So why hasn't the army stepped in to put his house in order?
Yeah, so government which came to power in 2018, it was not possible without military intervention. Even before the election, 2018 election, the banning of when Nawaz Sharif was barred from running for prime ministership by the Supreme Court, and with that, and even after that, there were set of defections which happened in his party in MQM. The split happened. Then there was a ruling coalition. There was a ruling coalition with PML and Nawaz Sharif's party, which there was a split again, and there was another party was from Balochistan Awami Party, which is now supporting Imran Khan. An element of unity in the political position at that time was created to prevent Nawaz Sharif from coming to power, and Imran Khan was the direct beneficiary of it. So he came to power in that backdrop that army was supporting him. But after he came to power, then there was this talk of that the two sides they are on the same page, the army and the political leadership. But then his functioning, he functioned in quite a dictatorial way. He used state machinery against his political rivals from Nawaz Sharif's party, from PPP, Pakistan People's Party. Almost all the top politicians, they were jailed at one pretext or another. Nawaz Sharif, former President Zardari, or Nawaz Sharif's daughter even. And this instilled a sense of opposition, unity in opposition. And then there was economic collapse. He mismanaged the economy. There were no jobs. And then there was political mismanagement. For example, there was an unknown guy called Usman Buzdar who was made the CM of Punjab. And Punjab province in Pakistan, it is like central to Pakistani politics. And generally, it is the Nawaz Sharif's party which has a major say in that province. But PTI, because of the defections that happened before the 2018 elections, and PTI was the major beneficiary of it. The government of PTI in that province was very inefficient, to say the least. And then there were corruption charges against the same guy, favoritism charges. And because the two sides, the army and Imran, they were on the same page, the heat which was on Imran, it was being passed on army leadership, military establishment as well. And with this, what happened was this was evident last year when opposition leaders they started targeting army leadership over the support of Imran, calling them by their name. And in October, when this how far the same page the differences between the two sides of the same page have developed. It was clear when Prime Minister Imran Khan, he did not approve General Bajwa's decision to appoint General Nadeem Ahmad Anjum as ISI chief. Imran said that he wanted to continue Faiz Hamid, who was known to be closer to Imran, as ISI chief. And then that decision was, in a limbo for around 3 weeks. And after that, he considered that General Nadeem Anjum, he became ISI chief. And this happened in October. And then afterwards, it was clear that the two sides are not on the same page. As economic problem, they started mounting, and political opposition had started uniting. And because Faiz Hamid, who was the ISI chief, and he was taking massive hits from opposition, and this was ultimately tanking the army's reputation as well. So it was clear that the military establishment, it has to distance itself from the blunders that Imran was committing. And Imran's challenge to Army Chief Bajwa, it may have sealed the deal for him. So for recently, ISPR spokesperson, he said that, in one of his press conference, he said that army, when he was asked about political turmoil that is going on in the country, he said that army has nothing to do with the politics, and, we'll remain neutral. And interestingly, what Imran said shows how far these sides are. Imran said that humans either have good side or evil side. Only animals remain neutral. And further on, there is an issue of army chief's extension to be decided this year. So from Bajwa's point of view, Imran's stay, I personally believe that doesn't help. On the other hand, if political instability persists in Pakistan, then Bajwa's term has to be extended. So it is not likely that army will come to help Imran, but even the neutrality part, which essentially means that army is not going to save his government, which it was doing till now. And this brings to fore, the Shrey Khanna model that has been in implementation in Pakistan for quite some years, which is essentially a model of indirect military rule as opposed to the Ayub Khan model, which requires a direct military intervention. And Imran Khan was supposed to be, the poster boy of it, because he was, like other parties like PMLN and PPP, which have their differences with army leadership. Imran Khan, because he was elected with the support of army, it was thought that because they will remain on the same page. But even this has not happened, and that model, which people in the West have called the hybrid model, it has stopped working now.
Interesting. On that note, folks, we'll take a small break. Don't go anywhere.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cock and Bull, Cyrus and Silvery are joined by Nivedita Prakasam and Abhijit Ganguly. They discuss SRK's new venture SRK Plus and the Kanye West versus Pete Davidson controversy. Join Keshav Chaturvedi on Tere Mere Raste. He discusses Holi celebrations across India and how Holi traditions in the Bridge region of Uttar Pradesh are something completely different. On All Things Policy, the hosts talk about how India accidentally launched a missile into Pakistan. Do check out the Marathi Kirkitun podcast, which is back after a short break. New episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. And on Smarter with Sid, Sid tells us 3 lessons that we can learn from the famous YouTuber Mr. Beast. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any platform that you might be listening to us. You can also check us out on YouTube. We have a webpage, ivmpodcast.com/YouTube, where a list of all our channels are. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance, Bank of Baroda, India Water Portal, and Max Life Insurance. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back, folks. You're listening to All Things Policy, and we're discussing the latest in Pakistan's political sphere. So, Shrey, what are these 2 models of military intervention in Pakistan that you just mentioned?
Okay, so I've discussed this in one of my papers, just published in 2019 in Nation Survey. I will give the link. to it in the description. So essentially, the difference is that there have been, military coups in Pakistan. There was Ayub Khan's coup, then there was General Ziaul Haq's coup, and then General Musharraf's coup. So the idea of Ayub Khan model is that army will come in and it will take control of the government, and then it will rule directly, and it will, kind of neutralize the civilian politics. As opposed to this, there was a guy called Sher Ali Khan, and he wrote in 60s after the fall of Ayub Khan. He said that military's ability to take control from incompetent politicians after the fall of Ayub was not because of the firepower, it was because the army had charisma. And because this charisma is a precious political resource, he said, and if this charisma is once lost, it cannot be easily retrieved. And because this charisma is, it was based on false premises that army is different from the common people, it is important that such differentiation is maintained. So if a direct contact happens with Pakistanis, then it will disillusion them that army is functioning in the same way like any other civilian. So Sher Ali's formula was that to preserve the oligarchy, the military establishment, we need a badly divided parliament, warring political parties, and then in that context, army will step in and take the role of referee. So this strategy was grounded in a distinction between the power and responsibility. While power will be wielded by the military establishment and perpetuating and safeguarding army's power, it will be the responsibility of army, while responsibility for day-to-day affairs in the government, it will be the responsibility of the government, because responsibility, as Shay really put it, it was not only a burden, but by making the holder of responsibility the target of popular discontent, it undermined power. So, and this was seen during the first decade of democracy that happened in 1989 to 1999, and then the second decade of democracy, 2008 to 2018, in which during this time, army relied on playing a role of a mediator, which will, judge upon how the power is to be divested to civilian entities. So, as opposed to the Ayub Khan model, which relies on overt coup, marginalization of political parties, and the stifling of all civilian discontent, civilian dissent, co-optation of judiciary, etc. So these are the two different models by which army has ruled Pakistan. And now the second, the Sher Ali model, essentially was continuing till 2008 to 2018. But in 2018, this was the rise of Imran Khan was like success of the Sher Ali Khan model, because army came in. Army decided that Imran has to be the candidate who will become prime minister. And then because there was no past problems as they were with PMLN and PPP, they came on the same page. They were on the same page. And then Imran came to power. But after that, gradually, the source of power and responsibility, there will be conflict. If responsibility on of all the wrongdoings is pinned on Imran Khan, and Imran Khan is supported by army, then army will have to take the responsibility for it. So now what is happening is that to shed that responsibility part, and importantly to save that power, military's own power, its own reputation, I think Imran Khan will have to go.
All right. So, coming to the future, what do you think is the future of Pakistani politics on a broader level? If the army is not stepping in to save Imran Khan, does this set a precedent which would have an impact, even if Imran Khan is no longer prime minister? Whoever comes next, would this be a paradigm shift?
I think it's too soon to say whether this will be a paradigm shift. As far as my personal opinion is concerned, I don't think this is going to be a paradigm shift, because none of what is happening right now, it is not possible without army's silent acceptance. And the even if Imran Khan is not there, problem with army right now is that they cannot, the problems in Pakistan are of that magnitude that taking the responsibility for correcting those problems, it's not in army's interest. So it's better that remain behind and they control the situation from behind. So someone, even those others who will come up, they have to face the establishment. And even if Imran Khan, who was the candidate of the establishment, if he could not manage that relationship and tensions, they came up, then someone who is coming from, say, PMLN, which is the second largest party right now in Pakistan, or Pakistan People's Party, they have, traditionally problems with time to time with the military establishment. So that sort of problems will likely to remain. Army is likely to, govern from behind, unless there is these talks I read about of using a nuclear option. Now, nuclear option in this context is that if Imran Khan fires army chief, and then there will be a problem, then he'll have to impose his will, Bajwa. So unless that happens, army will like to control Pakistan's democracy from behind. And as far as the civilian unity is concerned, there was a sort of unity after the 2008 elections. But that unity, that civilian unity between PMLN and PPP, it gradually gave away. And right now, the level of discourse it's not a discourse which is quite political. It is more like two sides which are, bitter enemies without any recourse to civility. So, for example, Imran Khan is calling Shehbaz Sharif a boot polishing Shobaz, Zardari a murderer, Dakat kind of a thing, calling Fazlur Rahman, Maulana Fazlur Rahman, Maulana Diesel. So, and making fun of, not fun of, and disrespecting, many would say, army chief as well. So that level of discourse is right now there. But even if we think about long term, if Imran Khan goes, then there can be an interim government till elections happen. So that is one way things can pan out. Or there can be a caretaker government, and then till the elections they happen, because elections are due next year. So there's a lot of uncertainty right now, but I don't see a paradigm shift in Pakistan's democracy. Any civilian party which comes to power, it has to face the same pressure from the military establishment about sharing power. While responsibility you can take, power is limited, which the establishment will share, and then there will be problem with any civilian government that comes to power.
That's a very interesting note to conclude on. So on that note, folks, we'll call it a wrap. And if you like today's discussion, do check out all past and future episodes of All Things Policy.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
Ladies, I'm sure you will relate to it if I say that we are constantly busy with work, studies, cooking, and what not. And amidst all of this, we often forget an important element that needs our desperate attention: finance. So here we are, bringing to you SBI Life Presents A Sip of Finance, a women-exclusive podcast where we will teach you how to manage personal finances in a simple and straightforward way with your host, Priyanka Acharya, a finance expert who's been in the industry for 14 plus years. And not just in English, but in 7 more languages. So tune in every Tuesday for fresh episodes on the IVM Podcast Network and all major podcast streaming platforms.
Love fighting?
We've got you covered.
Check out our show, The Fighting Goat, where we, the voices of the internet, Arjun Chipalkatti and Somesh Kamra, bring to you crazy weekly action on your favorite combat show, The Fighting Goat.
Be it commentary, breakdown, predictions, analysis of styles and techniques.
And of course, your round of favorite fighters.
You can listen to us every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website, and all major podcast streaming platforms.